Hello, my name is Cindy Paul, and I'm the lay speaker from First United Methodist Church in downtown Elgin, Illinois, and this is your motivational moment from the Bible. These motivational moments are designed to go along with what you heard in the sermon on Sunday, but maybe they can just be a short devotional for you, or just to give you an extra spiritual boost to start your week. If you were here last week, you may remember that we started the story of Joseph and his amazingly dysfunctional brothers. Personally, I think that would have been a better title for the play, but no one bothers to ask me these things. But before we get started, let's first do a quick review. We found out in episode 1 that Joseph, while not the firstborn son, is definitely the favorite son. So Dad goes out and buys him this stunning and extravagant coat of many colors, as Dolly Parton would call it. This gets the other brothers all bent out of shape because why does he get nice things and we don't? So one day, they decide that Joseph has got to go. They wait for one of those rare moments when Dad is not doting on him, and the brothers grab Joseph, take him out past the fields, and throw him into the well. The plan was to leave him to die, but suddenly a caravan of Ishmaelites come along, and brother Judah comes up with a harebrained idea of how they can make some extra cash. He says, "I've got a great idea. Let's sell him to those vagabonds." So the brothers agree, and off Joseph goes to Egypt. Last week we talked about how God had made a covenant with Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, and how these 11 brothers, the sons of Jacob, would ultimately lead to that fulfillment. Despite the fact that these brothers did this unspeakable act to Joseph, God still fulfilled his promise. He didn't say, "All bets are off because you're all a bunch of jerks." Nope, God didn't change a thing. It illustrates how God's grace and mercy is constant, even when we behave in ways that are undesirable. Pastor Tom Walker once said that thank goodness God was not fair, because if he was, we'd all get exactly what we deserve. Touche to that. Today, we are going to continue this story of Joseph. So in episode 2, the Ishmaelites take Joseph to Egypt, where he is bought as a slave by one of Pharaoh's head officials, a man by the name of Potiphar. And Potiphar takes a liking to Joseph, so much so that he makes him head of his household. Now, Potiphar has a beautiful wife. You know, the kind that had an ulterior motive when she married him, because there's no other explanation for why someone like her would be married to someone like him. You get the picture. Anyway, scripture tells us that Joseph was, and I quote, well built and handsome. So when Potiphar's wife gets a look at Joseph, well, you don't need me to spell it out. Of course, eventually Potiphar figures out what's going on. And despite the fact that nothing ever really happened, Potiphar nonetheless has Joseph arrested and tossed in jail. As Andrew Lloyd Webber would say, poor, poor Joseph. Now, while he's in jail, Joseph meets 2 other prisoners who, at one time, were servants for Pharaoh, and they discover that Joseph is quite good at predicting the future by interpreting dreams. They also know that Pharaoh has lately been plagued by a series of very weird and very disturbing dreams, so they suggest that maybe Joseph can help. So Joseph is brought before Pharaoh, and through his handy skills at interpreting dreams, he is able to advise Pharaoh that Egypt will soon have several years of bumper crop, followed by several other years of famine. So, pre-planning might not be a bad idea. Pharaoh is delighted with this information and takes Joseph's wise advice, which means the famine doesn't affect Egypt at all because they were prepared. For this amazing feat, Pharaoh rewards Joseph by making him second in command. He says, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Well, what do you know? Look at Joey now. Meanwhile, back in Canaan, Jacob and his sons aren't faring so well because you see, they had no idea the famine was coming, so they weren't prepared. But word on the street is that Egypt is overflowing with grain. So Jacob sends his sons to Egypt to see if the Egyptians can find it in their heart to sell them some grain. But when the brothers get there, lo and behold, I guess they forgot who was living in Egypt. Oops. Now, there are more details to this story that I'm going to skip because I think it's important to talk about where this story ends up. At first, the brothers do not recognize Joseph because, it's been a few years. But eventually, he reveals himself to them. Immediately, they panic and think it's going to be curtains for them out of retribution for what they did to him. Guess what? He forgives them. Joseph forgives his brothers. He basically gives them everything they are asking for and more. He gives them carts and livestock. He gives them a whole bunch of shekels, and each one gets a brand new wardrobe. Not only that, he also invites them to all come and live with him in Egypt and bring Pops along too. And they all live happily ever after. Not bad. There are two things I want to talk about regarding this story. The first one is obviously forgiveness. If you consider that the prodigal son is a parable, this is quite possibly the biggest story of forgiveness in the Bible. And it's especially important when you consider where in the Bible it is. It is at the very beginning. When Joseph is carted off to Egypt, Moses isn't even born yet. How hard is it for you to forgive? Is your forgiveness on a sliding scale? The bigger the offense, the harder it is to forgive. Minor offenses, maybe a little bit easier. But should it even matter? God makes it clear in this story what his expectations are of us. We are not only called to forgive, but we are also called to forgive above and beyond. Or as Jesus later said, 70 times 7. Joseph not only forgave his brothers, he also reaped many blessings upon them. He was so glad to see them that none of their past transgressions even mattered anymore. His priorities were in the right place. God also makes it clear how important forgiveness is because he makes it one of the first lessons he wants us to learn. He wants us to get this right before we move on to anything else, because that's how important forgiveness is. I've discovered over the years that I'm a selfish forgiver. I don't have time to be bogged down by anger, resentment, and bitterness over what you did or did not do. I've got better things to do with my time. And so does Joseph. He's carrying a lot of responsibility now. He can't afford to waste time hashing over the wrongs his brother did to him. He had to let it go. And look what happened when he did. Which brings me to the next point of this story. Not only does Joseph forgive his brothers, he tells them that he is grateful for what they did. And why? Because none of this would have happened without them. He now has control over all of Egypt. He now has Pharaoh's ear and can do good for the people. And he is grateful for that. In one of my husband's previous jobs, the owner had gone many years without paying his federal income tax. So, one day, without notice, the IRS shows up and shuts the place down. And suddenly, my husband is without a job. just like that. No warning, no notice, no payback that he was owed to the tune of $2,000. All of it gone. We were devastated. My husband was pretty angry. He was out of work for 7 months in his early 50s, which, as you know, is not a good age to be out looking for a new job. But it led to the best job he had ever had, working for a company that was amazing in literally every aspect. I worked for one of the largest companies in the country, and I was envious of how well he was treated by his employers. If his old boss had paid his taxes like he was supposed to, my husband would never have gotten this great job. It was a job that literally changed his life, and he was grateful every day until he retired. God works all things for good. We know that, and he shows us over and over again. But our knee-jerk reaction is to be bitter and angry, to fire off hateful words, to maybe retaliate, to possibly sever relationships because we can't see past our own resentment, because we don't wait to see what God can do. You see, that was Joseph's strength. It wasn't his ability to interpret dreams. It was his ability to wait and see what God could and would do. So let's review. We've learned that when we mess up, no matter how badly, God doesn't write us off or cast us aside because we can't be trusted. Even though it's true, we absolutely can't be trusted to get it right. But God changes nothing. He keeps his promises and he keeps his covenant to be with us always, no matter if we are the biggest losers in the land, no matter what. We've learned that forgiveness is worth the effort. In fact, it is absolutely necessary if you want to live your best life. Harboring hard feelings only weighs you down and keeps you from embracing all that God has in store for you. If you're willing to let it go, then your hands will be open to receive the new thing that God is doing. And finally, we've learned that those who do you wrong may actually be doing you a favor. Your enemy may actually be the best thing that's ever happened to you. Adversities are not dead ends. They are quite possibly just a detour to an answered prayer. Remember that. You got all that? Good. Class is dismissed. I'm Cindy Palm, and this is your motivational moment from the Bible. You have a good week.